So we ended with a question last week, and it was kind of why 10 plagues? Why, and we've got a bunch of questions. We're going to take this story and we're going to dissect it a little bit and try to figure out what God's heart is here. What is God after? You see on the screen here, Ryan took a lot of time this week to prepare us a PowerPoint. He wanted to make sure I had a few things. And I have been overwhelmed with information. And I am very nervous today that I'm not going to be able to convey this. I have listened to stuff. I have looked at stuff. I have read stuff. And I have read a lot of good stuff. And the problem with me reading a lot of good stuff is it gets in here and it comes out like this. That's what's going on in my brain. And so my problem is I have a hard time writing stuff down. I have a hard time getting things out. And sometimes when it gets to this point, I'm just like, ah! And so I'm going to try to remain calm and present to you all as best I can this story of the Exodus. So we haven't really touched on this yet, but it is a part of the story. I've mentioned it in passing, but we have here God setting himself up, and Ryan kind of hit this at the last week, was God is not setting himself up against Pharaoh. God is not setting himself up against Egypt. And God is not pitting one side against another. God is looking for the heart of the Israelites. God is looking for the heart of the Israelites and some of the Egyptians. God is looking for the hearts of all people. Who does that include? Huh? Us? Well, let's remain in the story. Who does that include? Who? Pharaoh. And so we've kind of set this up in our minds of, well, God is out to get Pharaoh here, and that's really seemed what, and so we have to really take some time here and say, okay, well, what's going on here? What's God pitting himself against? And so we've talked about this some in the past, but I want to kind of, because this is the lessons I follow, they take the time to do the tale of two kingdoms. And so we want to understand how we define God, because this is going to stand out. So as we look at these stories, we have the Exodus story. What are some other stories that we've looked at to kind of like, well, that's kind of out of God's character? What's something else you've kind of... Crystal, if I were to ask, what bothers you about the Old Testament? What would you say? Some of the violence and the wrath. So what? And she's talked about that in the past, and that's something that we've had conversations on, and it's true, especially with women. A lot of people who have that compassion are bothered about these tales of the death of the firstborn and the death of the whole city of Sodom and the flood story, the narrative. I mean, if we were honest with ourselves, if we were honest and we said, okay, I'm Johns, I'm God, I don't like that city over there, and I'm going to destroy it. What would you say about that?
When he gets ready to destroy it, he means completely. Women, children,
right.
and all.
And if I came across and did that, what would you all say about me? Need to be put in jail. That's right. That's a good point.
They just take you to the tree.
So we have to come to the place where we understand why God is doing, because it is out of character for God to do what he does in these areas. And we have to look at a bigger picture. What is God trying to accomplish in this story of his wrath? Because it is out of where we have seen a God of grace. We have seen a God that has moved where Jacob moved, and moved where Abraham moved, and moved where all the fathers have moved to. God has been like, okay, I can work with that. Okay, I can deal with that. Okay, well, you messed up here, but that's okay. But when a society starts to build its wealth and its kingdom and its power upon the backs of people, that's where God starts to have a problem. So who is God? He's the God who hears the cry, right? He's the God that comes to the defense of those who are oppressed. And we kind of glanced through that a little bit with Sodom. I mean, who was crying out in Sodom? It never said. The innocent. And even though they might not have even known they were under the oppression, they have grown up in this wicked place. Doesn't creation cry out for God's redemption? We've seen that in the Bible. Yes, ma'am.
I've heard the blood cries out from the
Absolutely.
from Kentucky, all the little graves and and I heard them say blood.
It's awful.
Cries out from
And we see God listening to the cry of that innocent. I mean, how many here we're going to see these plagues. Some of them mirror the exact same things that the Egyptians did to the Israelites. I mean, they're just the plague of the blood in the Nile. There was a part where the Nile was just a place to deposit babies. And Pharaoh ordered that. And they just tossed them in the river. Gone. The cry of the innocent on the backs of an empire built on the backs of those who can't do any better. And there are familiar lessons that we need to learn from this, because we need to hear in this, I'm a patriot, I love America, but we have to also be careful that we don't build our empire and our lives on the backs of others. On how and we don't pour everything into our politics and we don't tie it all in together, and we have to be so careful. There's such a fine line in love of country, and because this is what Pharaoh, if you wanted Pharaoh to succeed, because that's who Pharaoh was, we have to understand their worldview in Egypt was that the Pharaoh succeeded. See, there was this place called the Cartouche. There was this opening between, and in their creation story, it's so amazing that the creation stories somewhat align besides what God did in creation. It's so amazing that they come down in these creation stories and we see the different peoples align. We see the flood stories align with the things that God wants. But the Egyptian creation story had Amun-Ra or whatever, and they're floating in this barge around, and we have waters. Does that sound familiar? And so there's a space opened, and there's waters above and waters below. And the Pharaoh, that is called the Cartouche. And the Pharaoh holds this Cartouche, this space open between the gods. In this water above and water below. That's what they saw the Egyptian, the gods on this barge. And that's where they disappeared, was the waters below the earth. And brought the sun back up around again. And so the Pharaoh held this open. And so if you wanted your world to succeed, who did you want to succeed? Pharaoh. If you wanted your worldview to step up and be the one that everybody wanted, then you wanted Pharaoh to succeed. And we come across this new Pharaoh. We watched the Pharaoh of Joseph's time go out and bury his father, and they all went out. Egypt went out and mourned for Jacob. And now we got a Pharaoh who does not know Joseph. And God is still trying to call out to the Pharaoh and the Egyptian people. If he can get Pharaoh to kneel, if he can get Pharaoh to leave Egypt, whew. So that's what we're going to look at here this morning. Pharaoh is empire. And God is a kingdom of shalom. What does shalom mean? Peace. We have empire versus shalom. Not God versus Pharaoh, not God versus Egypt. We have empire versus shalom. We have two pictures. And if you ever watch the Ray Vander Laan series, they're really neat. He talks about the tale of two sticks. You have Moses' staff, and you have Pharaoh's stick. And Pharaoh's stick represented in the hieroglyphs over that day, you saw Pharaoh lording it over with the stick. He had that stick in his hand. He was over the peoples, and they were doing what they were told. And Moses comes in with the staff. And it's really neat if you read the first part of when Pharaoh or Moses throws down the stick and turns to a snake. And what does Pharaoh's people do? They throw their sticks down and become a snake. But then when it comes to, it says that the other snakes, it doesn't say the snake ate the snakes. It says the stick ate the sticks. The stick, the staff, is the representation. This is to see a deeper picture, a deeper meaning, a beautiful picture of us choosing peace over power. And you've got the Israelites in this beautiful land. Joseph has put them in the land of Goshen. And if you ever see that same series that Ray does, you've got the people in this land of Goshen. And it's a beautiful place. It's the floodplain, so they had to be nomadic. When the floods came, they had to go and live in Egypt, and then they could come back and work the land. But they had a beautiful, and there's actually, in those videos, there's a place where you'll see Ray standing, and it's beautiful, lush farmland. And then the camera pans just a little bit, and it is a straight line of pure desert. Not a leaf, not a weed, nothing. And so God's calling his people out of this. Whew. We look at all of our stuff and our comfort, and we say, well, of course God is here. Where do you think the where do you think the Israelites would have wanted God to be? In the lush, beautiful fields. What was God calling them out of? What was he calling them into?
Calling them out of comfort into the desert ahead.
Into what?
They didn't know.
Trust.
Yeah. Eventually they're going to get to a land.
They are. They are, absolutely. But they had to trust the story to get there. And did that generation make it? No. Because God's going to eventually come up with a problem takes 10 plagues to get his people out of Egypt. What is it going to take for God to get Egypt out of his people? That is the problem. Because we're going to see for books, they're still going to have those Egyptian idols. They're still going to be worshiping those. They have bought into the Egyptian mindset because Joseph worked the Egyptians into slavery. The slaves made the tools for the Israelites to use. And now it's turned about. And now the Israelites are the slaves. And there's a Pharaoh that knows not God. And we're going to see that. So, let's see here. Let me see if I hit all my notes. Yeah. So we're going to open up with some questions. Why is it called the Passover? These are all straight out of Foreman's book. If y'all ever want to know what that book is, it's an amazing book. I'll get that. So we're going to ask some questions. Why was it called the Passover? Why do we focus on the final plague? Huh? God passed over, the angel he sent over. But we could have called it Freedom Day. We could have called it, kind of like we do, the 4th of July. We could have called it, but it really focuses on that last plague. I'm sorry, y'all. So it's really tying this in, this part of, and why does it focus on the firstborn? So at the culmination, the Bible takes a break and steps into this place where it gives all these laws about the firstborn. And so why does it do that? There's going to be a conversation. Obviously, like Butch said, that it's going to pass over. We see that the firstborn is something that is going to be a big thing at the end, right? Of all the laws that Israel puts in, so there's this thing, a tefillin, that they wear on their arm. And there's going to be some laws that they're going to put in that. And that's why, so they'll always remember them. The one is the Shema, which is the Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. And then there's going to be the Lord your God, love the Lord your God with all your heart, and all your soul, and all your mind. And then the third one that they're going to put in this is the law of the broke-necked donkey. Seems odd, doesn't it? Seems odd. Is a donkey a clean animal? Nope. So why would the Jews focus on redeeming the firstborn donkey in something that they keep on themselves all the time? If you're going to rescue a people, why drag this out 10 plagues? Could God have done this in 1 plague? 2 plagues? 3 plagues? 6 plagues? 9 plagues?
Whatever you want.
That's exactly right. God could have spoken the Israelites into a land of milk and honey. Couldn't he have? He spoke creation into existence. He spoke this world into existence. You think he can't speak a people somewhere? We see that he gets to Pharaoh and he says, God says, I want you to get my people out of Egypt. And then Moses ends up going in and asking for 3 days. Kind of a long weekend. Why does he do that? Who's hardening God's heart here? Is it God? Is it Pharaoh? I mean, we got a little thing here Ryan's made us. Don't look at that yet. But that's something we've been fighting with forever. You know, I mean, what does the Calvinist say? The Calvinist says that our fate is chosen, right? That we are predestined for our. And so there's a point here where it looks like God's doing the hardening. There's a point here where Pharaoh's doing the hardening, and we're like, what's going on here? Why is Pharaoh so interested in precision? I want the frogs gone. Moses says, okay, let my people go. He says, well, I want the frogs gone tomorrow. When would you want all the frogs to leave? Now. I want them gone now. Why is Pharaoh interested in the frogs gone tomorrow?
Still wants to be in control.
Well, let's continue to look here. So let's get into chapter 5 here. Afterward, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, "This is what the Lord of God of Israel says. Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival for me in the wilderness." So let's freeze here and let's see here. Pretend you're Moses and you said these words to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh is about to respond. And here's what Pharaoh says to you. It says, who is the Lord, that I may obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. So we find a Pharaoh who does not know Joseph. We know he knows all the gods, and he may think he knows all the gods. And he is the facilitator between Egypt and the gods. So who is this God? This El Shaddai, this God that I do not know. So Moses says, maybe he could turn around and say, well, we could answer, we could throw our hands up, we could go back to God for further instructions. That would make sense. Your second option is act opposite. Instead of retreating, you could up the ante and say, look, Pharaoh, you don't know who you're provoking here. This is the master of the universe. Trust me, you don't want to make him angry. If you back down and let the slaves go, I think you'll be able to work something out with this God. But if you don't, I don't know how much Egypt is going to be left after God is done with you. Is that what he might have said? Maybe he could have said something like that. Then he said in verse 3, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now let us take a 3-day journey into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God, or he may strike us with plagues or with the sword. Do you think that's what Moses believes about God?
No.
No. What is he trying to do here then?
Trying to get Pharaoh to change his mind.
He is. He's trying to get Pharaoh to change his mind. But so let's talk about the polytheistic look of gods. What do we do when everything's going right and we're worshiping the rain god and we're getting plenty of rain? Are we really concerned too much about the rain god? No, because we got what we need, right? Well, all of a sudden the rain stops for a few months. What's wrong with the rain god?
He's displeased.
He's displeased. And that is the way that polytheism works. The God is angry. The God needs to be satisfied. So now we've got to figure out what this God wants. We've got to figure out what this God is after. That is what he is trying to do. He is trying to talk to Pharaoh in a God that he may know and something that he may look at. The God of the Hebrews has met us. Now let us take a 3-day into the journey to offer sacrifices, or he may strike us with plagues or the sword.
Hey, John.
Hey,
Basically, I think Moses is saying, give us a 3-day break and we'll still be living. If we don't offer the sacrifices, God may kill your entire slave workforce.
absolutely. And he's in negotiations here, right?
Right.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's a very good point. So we gotta understand that he's working with his audience, and that's a very good point. So how does Pharaoh respond? A bunch of lazy people. You got too much time on your hands, obviously. You're making bricks without straw now. And so that didn't quite go as we want, right? Or does it? So God is after the heart of Pharaoh. We got a couple more questions here. All of a sudden, God seems like he cares about what his name is. He's not really been concerned to this point. In the matter of fact, in his wrestling match with Jacob, what does he say? What do you need to know my name for? You don't need to know my name. But all of a sudden, now that he's being announced to Pharaoh, all of a sudden we're worried about a name. Moses asked him, his name is similar to Jacob, and if you're reading the story, you might anticipate that God's not going to tell him. But now all of a sudden, God now has names. Not only this, but a little bit later in the story, he's going to be on his way back to Egypt. They're going to stop in the desert, and God's going to tell Moses to make sure he remembers the conversation that they had about names. And that's going to be interesting for our story. So God says to Moses in chapter 6, 2 through 8, we're going to skip a little bit. God says to Moses, I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name, the Lord, I did not make myself known to them. I established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan where that resides as a foreigner. Moreover, I have heard the groanings of the Israelites, who the Egyptians are enslaving, and I have remembered my covenant. Therefore say to the Israelites, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the yoke of the Egyptians. I will free you from being slaves to them. I will redeem you with my outstretched arm, and with my mighty acts of judgment. I will take you as my own people. I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the yoke of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the lands that I swore with uplifted hand to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give you possession. I am the Lord. So there's a place there. How many of you all have a footnote in your Bibles that says El Shaddai? Yours says that? Does it give a definition to El Shaddai? No, it just says El Shaddai, doesn't it? So there's a reason for that. It's because it's not really a clear term. But there's Shaddai, which would have made perfect sense for a polytheistic God, because it's the God of, now I'm not trying to be, but it's the God of the breast. It's a fertility God. It is one who brings fertility. But that's not the name he gives. It's Shaddai, and it's consonants. And eventually, this is one of the places, so you all have heard of me, me and Ryan, we've talked about the God who knows when to say enough the God who knows when to stop creating, and the God who knows when to stop destroying. This is one of those places that we see that. Because if you break this down in the Hebrew, it becomes in the consonants the God, the closest thing we can come to, and the rabbis have debated this, much smarter than me, not me, but they have come to the meaning that the God who knows when to say enough. But God changes his name here. God changes it. This is the first look we see at what some call Jehovah, which is a terrible translation of that. Yahweh, we see that. It's Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh. Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh in the preview. And it's also violations. And it's something not biblical. And it's this thing that we can't understand. It points to God as this timeless person. And in the book, he talks about the board game Monopoly. And it's a very good place to make a sidetrack. That you and I, or Pharaoh and Moses, will say, are two pieces of this game of Monopoly, created by Parker Brothers. And so let's say Moses is the top hat and Pharaoh's the dog. You know, whichever your favorite piece is. And they're trying to sit there and explain to one another by using this board game, this created board game about Parker. Mr. Parker, the creator. Using just what you know in that board, it would be very hard to explain someone who created. That's a very crude explanation of what God is saying here. It's like, you cannot understand who I am. I am timeless. I am beyond. I am who I am. Phew. And so we come to a Pharaoh who is supposed to be able to be the between the gods and the people. And God says to him, you can't even understand who I am, Pharaoh. A timeless person. Pharaoh is used to going between gods who are angry all the time. Who is this God who wants to know his people? Who not only wants to know them, but wants to go out into the desert and party with them? I mean, that's what the festival is, isn't it? It's a big party in the desert. We get really uncomfortable with that because we always have these images of drinking and smoking and doing, you know. But this is like a fellowship on the a meal on the hill, where you just go to be together with your God and you celebrate and you dance and you have fun and you remember that you are a redeemed people. Man. So God is going to work on Pharaoh through this. So we see that and this is something we haven't, there's actually two types as we go through. You're going to see in here, you're going to see that Pharaoh's heart is going to be the top one, the strengthened, and the bottom one, hardened. And that's actually in the Hebrew. That's as it's written. So you're going to see that two conversations, like we said, we've already talked about this. This is what the Lord God said, and then it goes on in verse 3. We've already done that part. So, can you all read any of that? It's kind of small for you all. In the first, we got plague 0, we're going to call it. It's going to be the stick to the snake. And the magicians repeat it, and Yahweh eats the other gods. Pharaoh's heart is hardened. That's a passive voice, and Pharaoh does not listen. So let's go back. A strengthening of the heart and hardening of the heart. The Nile of blood, the magicians repeat the secret arts. Pharaoh's heart is strengthened, and Pharaoh does not listen. 2, frogs everywhere. The magicians repeat with secret arts. Pharaoh asks for relief and says that he will let Israel go. Moses asks him to pray, and he says, when? He says, tomorrow. Pharaoh is trying to understand this precision. And if we go down through here, we're also going to want to see that Pharaoh also goes out and says, go out and see if that plague also happened out in the land of Goshen. Pharaoh is very, very intrigued by this God of precision. Gnats everywhere. The magicians try, but they can't repeat. This is the finger of God. Power. And Pharaoh's heart was strengthened, and he did not listen. 4, the flies only on the Egyptians and not in Goshen. Pharaoh tells Moses that they can sacrifice here in the land, but Moses says that it needs to be in the wilderness. Pharaoh says to go, but not very far, but Pharaoh hardened his heart and would not let them go. 5, livestock perishes only for the Egyptians in time predicted. Pharaoh investigates whether or not that had happened and whether the Israelites' livestock had perished. Pharaoh's heart is hardened with the passive, and Pharaoh does not let them go. Number 6, the boils. The magicians could not stand before Moses. And God, for the first time, God strengthens Pharaoh's heart. God is not quite ready to let go of Pharaoh's heart yet. He is trying to get Pharaoh to see the point. The locusts, hailfire. So I want to talk about this because this is very important. It's the plague of hail. The translation actually means fire encased in ice. Now that's kind of neat, isn't it? And if you look at that from the Egyptian standpoint, the god of fire and the god of ice are two very separate gods. And they are in war with one another. But here we have a God, the God, the timeless one, who encases fire in ice. And let's see, some Egyptians avoid the hail. Pharaoh says he has sinned. He recognizes that Yahweh is the true God. Pharaoh says they can go, but Pharaoh's heart is strengthened. Before the plague, Pharaoh's official on the locusts, they convince him to let Israel go, but Pharaoh says only the men can go. Pharaoh again says he has sinned. God strengthens Pharaoh's heart, and Pharaoh would not let them go. In the darkness, for 3 days only, Pharaoh says that all the people can go, but God's flocks and the herds must stay. God strengthened Pharaoh's heart and tells Moses not to come back. And then the final one, Pharaoh lets Israel go. God strengthens Pharaoh's heart, and Pharaoh pursues Israel. Now, in the text, I was going the wrong way. In the text, on 8, I think it is, it's 7 or 8. Let's see. Pharaoh, I guess it's 8. Pharaoh strengthens his own heart and says no. And that's at the point that God says, okay, now this is no longer me trying to see what I can do with you. This is me showing you who I am. we are out of time, and I have not done anything. But I want you all to understand that God is getting ready to give birth to a nation. There's going to be blood on the 4 doorways, the 4 posts, and the Israelites are going to come out of that. What also, and I'm not trying to be crude again, but what has blood all around it and a bursting forth of a new creature? Birth. And then the Ruach is going to move on the water again. The Spirit is going to move over, and they are going to pass through. And then you pull back and you see the Egyptians who did not bloody the doorposts. What happens to the firstborn there? It's never born. What did God, or what did Pharaoh tell the Egyptian midwives to do? He went back and he said, tell all the mothers that take them out, kill the babies, and tell their babies never survived. They were stillborn. God is showing that He remembers the cry of the innocent. And Israel is born through water. And we see this creation story again, the birth, the waters above and the waters below, and Israel passes through, and the Spirit moves on the water. And the Jews talk about being born again. They don't talk about it as much as they used to, because it's what did Jesus say? To be born of the water and the Spirit. Oh, does that not ring a bell? And people want to say, I don't know about baptism. I don't, what is that for? That's just something you do. God has set this up from the beginning. Born of the water and the Spirit. When you are baptized into Christ, you receive what? The Spirit of God. Y'all, this is a beautiful story, and I didn't get nearly through what I needed to today. I hope that I have somewhat done it justice, but it is so deep and so meaningful. It's hard for me to give it to you guys, but it is a beautiful, beautiful story of how God not only wanted His people to be reborn, but He wants all people to be reborn. So, thank y'all.